So the first album I ever bought, well, I didn't buy it, but my parents bought me a Beatles album, and it was for Christmas. And I can remember I was so excited, I couldn't wait till Christmas to get it, and I forced them to give me it early. And I played it and played it and played it and played it, and it was the most fantastic thing I'd ever heard. And then from that, I sort of graduated on to Jefferson Airplane and the Mamas and Papas, and I went through a phase of lots of American stuff. And then I kind of came back to British music again, because there was a whole folk revival went on in the 70s some point, and you had Fairport Convention, you had Steel Eye Span, Tim Hart and Maddie Pryor, you had all these incredible things going on. And then you had James Taylor, Livingston Taylor. I recorded one of his songs for my first ever recording. That and Only Love Can Break Your Heart, the Neil Young song. That album had just come out and it hadn't been hugely successful yet. And so we heard the song and we thought, let's make that our record. So yeah, lots of interesting, wonderful music in my life. I've been really fortunate. And I think it's coming round again now that there's going to be lots more exciting stuff happening. More melodic, interesting, fusion kind of stuff. Well, in the 70s, there was this sort of resurgence of English folk music. I'd always had Scottish folk music and Irish folk music as a kind of baseline, because my family, that was the background, Irish, Scottish. And we did lots of singing at family parties and things like that. And I was really into soul music, actually, because being a port, Glasgow used to get all the music over from America. If you lived in Edinburgh, you got things like Genesis and kind of Poncy music like that, we used to say. But in Glasgow, it was like really gritty stuff. So my second band, really, I suppose, KOB Bell, we were really into that whole kind of funk American thing. And at the same time, I was really into, I bought a Tom Rush album, who was an American folk singer, and he had this song Circle Game on it, and I thought, that's a really great song, where did that come from? Noticed Joni Mitchell, then started searching for her stuff and found her first album, which was very folky. And round about the same time, you had Fairport Convention doing some of her songs. You had Steel Eye Span coming out, you had sort of loads of really interesting kind of English folk music where they were actually taking really old songs like Lord Ranald and things like that, and they were kind of changing them and making them very current musically. So there was this whole kind of crossover of music. I didn't ever do folk music as a gig, ever, but it was a thing that it was my guilty pleasure. It was my guilty pleasure that I had at home that I would listen to. And then I remember going to see a Blodwyn Pig gig. I don't know if you've heard of them, but I went to see them, and I went to see Tyrannosaurus Rex, the original, when it was just the two of them. I went to see that in Glasgow, and I was really into knitting and crocheting and things like that at that time. And I sat up the back knitting a shawl. And my claim to fame was that Mark Bolan dedicated a song to me because I was knitting. And I've still got the shawl. It was purple and it's huge. And it still sits in my house. And every time I look at it, I think, Mark Bolan saw me knit that. And it's kind of a cool idea. But no, I just love music. I love all sorts of things. And I keep saying to younger guys and my son when he was growing up, I would say, I was really fortunate in that when the Beatles albums came out, it was like nothing you'd ever heard before. Nobody had ever heard those sounds, guitar sounds like that, vocals like that. And so it was like really new, and it just blew your mind. It was like, wow, what is this? And then you had all the stuff coming from America, like Jefferson Airplane, and it was like, this is incredibly crazy music, and I love it. You just couldn't get enough of it. And unfortunately, I don't think there is that now, because I think all those things happened. You had like King Crimson, Talking Heads, Tom Tom Club, all these amazing things. And now there's not any space for anything new at the moment. And so people seem to be going back and taking little bits from maybe their parents' or their grandparents' record collection and a little bit of a tune, and they'll go, I'm going to develop that. And so now they develop those things rather than start them from new. And that's a little bit of a shame, and it's good as well, because it means that the stories still go on, and a lot of people now refer back to the original music, and so that's all coming back into vogue again. I just don't know where music's going to go, and I'll be interested to find out. Hopefully I'll be around long enough to find out where it goes. But it's all interesting, and most types of music I can find something I like. The beginning of the 90s, I was doing lots of work with, when I wrote Touch and stuff, we were doing lots of work and made the Echoes album, and it was all over Scandinavia. So I was working there an awful lot, and I would take different guitarists from London, because I lived there at the time, and my guitarist would be off doing something else. I'd go, okay, and we'd find someone else and take them and, you know, rehearse and then go to do the shows. I remember working with this guy. He was the most amazing acoustic guitar player. And we got there and I said to him, can you kind of James Taylor that a wee bit more, you know, make it more kind of sprongly and really interesting acoustic guitar? And he looked at me and he went, who's James Taylor? And I was like, what? You're a guitarist and you don't know who James Taylor is? This was like, yeah, I couldn't believe it. I've got this kind of weird, very fortunate thing that when I started, a lot of the people who were working around me and worked with me or whatever, they all went on to do things like, my mate Gunji was Kate Bush's sound engineer for most of her career. And so he would be doing that, and it would be like, okay, well, we're going to do this gig, come along. So you would go and hear all this amazing stuff right at the beginning. And like, he then worked with Devo. So we all went to see Devo, you know, oh God, that's brilliant. You know, it was just like all these different things mixed up. And my husband, he's worked with like from Stevie Wonder to Talking Heads and various combinations and stuff. And you just go, oh, I'll go and have a listen to that. And it really was very fortunate, because a lot of people wouldn't have heard all the different varieties of music, you know. And so I was quite lucky. And then Stuart, the guy I write with, he worked with Diana Ross, he worked with all sorts of huge American acts, he worked with Rod Stewart, he worked with Rick Astley, just like all sorts of people. And so you would just go to the gigs, and it was like, yes. First recording I ever made was, like most of the things I've done in my life, it was really, it just happened. It wasn't premeditated. I didn't work hard to do it. Just suddenly I was in the right place with the right people. And the first recording was because my friend in Scotland was a songwriter, and he had done all these things to send to Chappell's Music in London, and he wanted a different voice, and he said, would you sing a couple of the songs? So I said, okay. So I sang a couple of his songs, sent them to Chappell's. And one of the guys there was a producer, and he said, I'd like you to come down and record. And I was like, well, one of these songs? No, I'd like you to come and record one of my songs. And so I went down to London with my mum, and we went into Olympic Studios in just off Regent Street. And the song, what was it called? I can't even remember. Imagine Me, that's what it was called. And it was a bit of a kind of, I mean, it was a pretty song, but it wasn't really, I was wanting to do more kind of worthy stuff. And so I said, okay, well, I'll do that, but can I do a couple of other songs that I'm choosing myself? And they said, okay. And so I just heard Only Love Can Break Your Heart. I thought, well, that's great. And then I heard the Livingston Taylor album, and I thought, oh, there's a song, it starts, Margaret, here's the thank you song. And I thought, I'd like to sing that. That'd be good, sing something with my own name in it. So we did all three. And there were some amazing people playing on it. BJ Cole played on it. The guy from, oh God, the drummer was very famous. I've forgotten who he is now, but it was so long ago. You forgive me. And we made it, and they wanted to do all this promotion on it and stuff, and I just thought, you know, I don't think I want to do this. I don't think this is the music I want to do, which was the single. And so I went back up to Scotland and sort of said, I don't think I really want to do that, Mum. And my mum said, okay, hen, just you stay. And so that was my big foray into recording in a huge studio. And then I decided I'd put an ad in a paper in Glasgow, just saying I was looking to join a band. And so I phoned the woman up and I gave her the information. And she said, okay, this will go in the paper tomorrow. And then about 5 minutes later, I got a phone call. And it was this guy saying, I hear you're looking for a band. And I was like, how did that happen? And apparently he phoned in to say they were looking for a singer. The woman said, oh, a wee lassie just was on the phone. Gave him my number. So I don't think the ad ever even went into the paper. And so from there I met Stuart McKillop, who I still work with now. And it was kind of crazy kind of things that happened. I'm a bit shy about that. I don't really want to push myself in that position. But if somebody comes up and asks me to work with them, I'm more than happy usually, because I like working with other people, and it's interesting to do things out with what I would normally write myself. So it kind of stretches you a little bit, and it can be a little bit scary. Like Jack Bruce, I was a huge Jack Bruce fan. Absolutely. His solo albums, I loved them. And I met him in a hotel somewhere in Germany when I was on tour with Mike, and we kind of got on. We were both drunk and we were chatting away, and it was great fun. And then about 8 years later, I got a call, would you like to do this song with Jack Bruce? And I was like, oh, he's my hero. I don't know if I can do this. And talked about it with Pete Brown, who was his lyricist, and thought, no, I'm going to do this because I absolutely love the music and I really want to do it. So got together with Jack, did the song Ships in the Night, and that was just fantastic. I loved it. He was such a brilliant musician. Soul music. Well, funk, really. Okay, my kind of soul music would be things like the Crusaders. The Crusaders were a huge favourite because KOB Bell signed to a record label that had Steely Dan and the Crusaders. And that's kind of why we signed them, because we really liked those bands. And we were supposed to go on tour with Steely Dan, then they cancelled. So we went into the office and suddenly found they had all these Crusaders albums in the cupboard, of which I took them all and took them home, played them, loved them, thought these are fantastic. And there was one track, Fly on Wings of Love, that I've always wanted to write lyrics for. And I actually have lyrics in my head that I've written for it. It's an amazing, amazing tune. So we started with the Crusaders, and then heavily into a Scottish band called the Average White Band. Hamish Stewart, one of the best ever. And he came and played with us at one point, and it was just like, wow. Hey, this is great, because I'd grown up sort of loving him. And then there was an English band called Kokomo that had 3 singers from Liverpool who were amazing. And they also had Jim Mullen, who was a Scottish guitarist, jazz guitarist, who was just superlative. They also had Neil Hubbard, who was another guitarist, but from England, who was incredible. In fact, they were just a brilliant band all round. And so I got kind of friendly with them, and they came and did some work on an album with me. And we kind of kept in touch over the years. And then it went from them to who, let me think. There was a lot of really good bands came down to Dingwalls in London, played the clubs there. You had things like the Ramones and stuff like that, Blondie, a bit of a mishmash. That wasn't really soul music, but it was kind of in a weird way. And then let me think, who else? Soul music. I got into sort of people like Etta James and various kind of black musicians, American musicians who just sung blues, really, that merged into soul, I suppose, because it started to be kind of cleaned up a little bit musically and made more for the populace, you know, it wasn't quite so rough and ready, and that was great. And then obviously things like the Yardbirds, Eric Clapton was in that band, and they did kind of a crossover, which I suppose ended up into sort of soul. But just, I really loved that kind of music. I liked the lyrics, I liked the kind of energy. Average White Band I just loved them because they were from Glasgow, and they had this whole different sound to anybody else around at the time, and they just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then Chaka Khan's band, I got into that because I really liked Tell Me Something Good, and I thought, what a great song. And it kind of morphed from there, you know, just anything that you heard, you were thinking, do I like that? Yeah, that's good. Do I like that? I'm not sure about that. With KOB Bell, that was like, I think it was about my third band in. Stuart and I had been in Joe Cool, and then we split that in half, and we joined up with 3 other guys from a band called Up, and that became KOB Bell. It was just like, there's a point in your life when you just feel you can do anything, and that was kind of that point. We all got together. Some of them came from university, they just finished their degrees. Some of us came from other areas that we were doing this and that, and we just all kind of got together. We rehearsed in our sound engineer's bedroom for the first 6 months. He would be lying in bed, and the drum kit set up at the foot of his bed. Simon went on to do lots of really good work all around the world, and he ended up selling, is it D&B monitor systems? He became the British representative for that. I mean, and he started with the drum kit at the foot of his bed, what can I say? But yeah, we kind of slogged around. We decided we weren't going to leave Scotland. We were going to continue to drive up and down the motorway. Didn't matter how long it took, we were going to keep doing that. We got to know the cows and the sheep almost in the fields as we passed, because we'd drive all the way to London, we'd do a gig in Dingwalls, and then we'd drive all the way back, so it's like 500 miles each way. And we just had a really great time. Sadly, in the last sort of 3 years, we've lost Colin, who was the sax player. And then Alan died round about now last year. And I mean, Alan went on to have the most amazing career. Colin played with Johnny Logan at the Eurovision Song Contest when he won everything, and he went on to do that. Alan went on to work with Bonnie Raitt and Clapton and all sorts of people. He was a phenomenal guitarist, and it was just, he had a memorial a week or so ago, and I had to send a little video, and I just felt so sad I couldn't be there. And it was like, well, you know, we grew up together. They were like my family, my brothers, really. And you don't get that after a certain point in your life. Yeah, you're all kind of working together, but it's not that intense. It was so intense, we hated each other every 5 minutes, and then we would love each other again, you know. And I sent a little video more or less saying that about Alan. And Lulu, who he worked with a lot, and Bonnie Raitt sent a video, and Lulu was there at the memorial, and they both said, working with Alan, he was a very tall man, they said working with Alan was like your wee brother, and you were always having to tell, you know, playing wise fantastic, but everything else about his life you were having to tell him, oh, calm down, you know, right, enough of that. He was one of those guys, when we were in London, if we were staying there, because we were doing a couple of gigs, we used to stay at this hotel called the Madison Hotel, and it was bands all stayed there. And Alan wouldn't come back, and you'd wonder, well, when is he going to turn up? And he'd turn up mid-morning without any shoes or something, and he would be going along Oxford Street to come to the hotel, and there was this gambling thing that where the guy had things underneath cups and they moved them about, and he was always getting stuck with that. And oh, right, he'd bet all his money and then he'd go, oh, okay, well, what have I got? Cowboy, you can have my cowboy boots. You know, he'd never win them, he'd always lose everything. And he was just completely nutty. And that was kind of life on the road with that band. They were all nuts. I kind of felt like I was the mum trying to calm down now, boys. But it was fun. It was fun in a way that it'll never be fun again. And now that music's changed so much, it's become safer to tour because of all the things that happen with touring. You don't get people falling down the back of a PA system anymore and suspended upside down for the whole gig. You don't get that anymore. Whereas then you did. But fortunately, nobody died, you know. But it was, yeah, it could have happened. But now it's, well, our van today showed a big red light and the driver went, oops. And we stopped for a minute and I thought, oh, it's happening again. But that'll be fixed and we'll all move on. Whereas back in the day, we'd have ended up having to empty all our stuff out and wait for somebody to come and save us. Songwriting, I don't actually know how I get inspired because I never thought of myself as a writer. In KOB Bell, we had Alistair, who'd been to school with Stuart. He was our lyricist. Stuart and Colin wrote most of the melodies for the things. And the rest of us would interpret them in whatever way we thought was the right thing to do, you know, cut things down, change bits of lyrics, stuff like that. But it didn't really feel that you were writing something. It just felt that it was part of what you did. And then I wrote a song, and it was the only one our publisher ever managed to do a cover for all the great KOB Bell songs. This song, Ain't No Doubt, was the only song Pete Barnes ever got a cover for. And I couldn't really work that out because it wasn't as intricate and as fantastic as these other songs. And I didn't really do much in the way of writing and thinking about writing until Jürgen actually said to me, I think it'd be good if you wrote some songs. And I thought, yeah, it would actually. And then I started working with Stuart on... He and I, we kind of do bits and pieces of each other. I mainly do lyrics and melody lines and stuff like that, but it kind of overlaps sometimes, and started working on stuff like that. And then Gavin, the bass player from KOB Bell, is a fantastic lyricist, and I started working on some stuff with him, with Stuart. And then the last of years, with Every Time We Touch, for instance, that was an idea from a meeting in the Mayflower Hotel in New York. And I'd gone out on tour with Mike, and I was away for like 3 months, and my boyfriend came to meet me, and he was on tour, but it kind of overlapped that he could come out to the States. So he arrived at the hotel, I arrived at the hotel, but we didn't know where we were in the hotel, and there were all sorts of lifts and things. And eventually when we did meet, we got in the lift, and there was that thing of touching ring, and you get the spark off the carpet. And that's where the initial idea for Every Time We Touch came from. And I don't actually sit down and go, I'm going to write a song. It's just sometimes things happen. And you just think, oh, and something comes into your head and you just write it. So I'm not one of these people that sit down. I know lots of people who can sit, like Charlie Dorr is a fantastic writer, and I've worked with her in the past. Kit Hain I've worked with too, and they literally can, you come up with a melody line and they'll sit down and just go do 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 do, and they've written a fantastic lyric, and you just go, how did you do that like that? With me, it kind of goes round my head for a bit, and I'll maybe get a hook line or an idea, this should be about this, because the melody says to me, this should be what this is about. And that's kind of how I'll be driving. Actually, I've written most of the things in my car, to be honest. And I'll be driving around and I'll just have this thing going round my head, and I'll, think, oh, that's it, and do it like that. Really, it's just, I take it, some songs come very, very fast. Like there's a song called Whisper, a couple of albums back, which just came into my head and that was it. I just thought, this is a lyric, where's the tune? Okay, put that together. But usually I have to think about stuff. So I get the idea of what it'll be about. There's the melody there. I'll work across that and put my own melody on top of the melody, and then do a lyric that suits. Family Man, for instance, was a collaborative thing with the band. Mike decided he wanted us to be a band for that album. So it was going to be the Mike Oldfield Band. And so we were all going to collaborate in various things. So they put together the track, and then everybody wrote bits of verses, and then I sung it all at the end. We kind of weeded out what verse was going to be used, what idea was going to be used, and then put it all together, and that became the song that I sung. With Foreign Affair, it was much the same. Foreign Affair, collaborative for the band. The track was put together, and then we all put in this part, that part, this verse, that verse. Oh, that sounds beautiful, right, that's what we're going to do. So I suppose that was a little bit of a lesson in how to kind of piece things together. We'd just been touring a lot, hadn't we? I mean, that says it all, really. We'd been touring a lot, and I think a lot of temptations had been thrown in the face of the men in the band, and it was just an idea, being on tour a lot. No, this isn't what we do. Tell the people back home this is not what we would do. So whether they did do that kind of thing or not, my lips are sealed, I cannot say. But that was what the song was about, really. Moonlight Shadow, there's lots of different stories about a lot of these things, because recollections may vary, as the Queen was heard to say a few years ago. When you try and think back, sometimes you don't all have the same memory of what happened. My memory of what happened was, round about that time, I was staying in a little cottage that was underneath Mike's studio, which my friend Richard lived in, and I had moved from Scotland and I was looking for somewhere to stay. So Richard said, stay here for now, which I did. And what would happen was Mike would be in the studio, and he'd think, right, I've got this idea. And he would just bang on the floor. And then I would go up and we'd start to record stuff. And this happened quite a few times. With Moonlight Shadow, I just remember him, because we used to work, when we worked together, we worked really intensely to the point where you almost lost your voice, because you were always trying to find what it was he wanted. Because he wasn't a singer himself, but he had an idea in his head of the kind of thing he wanted it to be. This is what it seemed to me. And so what we would do is I'd start at a point, and then I'd kind of try something else and move it around, and he'd say, try this, or I'd say, what about this? And eventually we would come to a thing that was the thing that worked for the song. With Moonlight Shadow, he called me up. I went up to start recording. I think we did it over a couple of days. I can't remember exactly, but it was quite fast, the way we did it. Here's the song, and I thought, oh, that's kind of like a little folk song, that's really pretty. Started to work on it, and his thing was, do it with an English accent. And I looked at him and I said, I'm a Scot. And he said, yeah, try and do that with a bit of an English accent. And so that's what I did. I sort of thought, channel your inner English person. And we did it a number of times, and then we thought, this is it, this is what the song should be. And then I kind of went away and forgot about it, and we went off on tour again, and we did other things. And I was actually amazed that the song has had so much of a life. When I started doing solo stuff, when I stopped working with Mike, it was because we finished a tour, and I said to him, I've toured for 5 years solid now. I think I want to just stay at home for a while. and I don't think I want to tour anymore. And so we kind of went like that. And Moonlight Shadow had been around and around and around, and it was us. And there was a lot of stuff at the time about when we recorded it. It wasn't the norm to put sung by. You know, nobody had done that, and so it wasn't like it was done on purpose that I wasn't on the cover or anything. It just wasn't the thing that was done. You just did what you did, and that was it. But I think Mike got a bit of flack about, well, that's not a woman, you know, why is it a man's name and it's a woman's voice? And I don't think that was fair, really, because it hadn't been a thing to put this is by and this is who sings it. But after that, it became a thing that people always put who had sung it on the thing. So when I stopped working with Mike for a while, I thought, okay, I'm doing solo stuff. I'm not going to go back to the Oldfield stuff because that's not fair. That's what we did together. That was our thing, and this is a different thing. And so I used to drive promoters mad because I'd say, don't promote it as voice of, you know, that. No, let's make it stand alone. And it drove them crazy, obviously. And then I realised I went to a Joe Jackson concert and he did Different for Girls. But it was a woman that sung the part. And I was incensed. I was like, no, that's not, it's got to be him that sings that bit. And it made me think, well, people want to hear what they want to hear, and they want to hear it in the way that they know it, and they, you know, so you don't deviate too much. And I thought, no, I will start doing those songs again, because I did sing them. Some of them I co-wrote, you know, so it's not a big deal if I sing them, you know, and people want to hear them, and so I did. And it kind of freshened it up for me, because if I'd been singing them all those years, I would just have felt like I was kind of on Mike's coattails, basically, and I didn't want to feel that, and I didn't want him to feel that either, you know, that I was having a career out of the work that we'd done together. So it kind of worked for me that when I started singing it again, I looked on it in a completely different way. It felt fresh. It was great to do it again, and the other songs too. And people want to hear them, you know, and I just think, yeah, you want to hear them. I wanted to hear Joe Jackson sing that song, but, you know, I'm going to do it. And I never, ever in my wildest dreams thought that it would last all these years, because it's a long time now. And people still come up, and the same with Every Time We Touch, though. People come up about those two songs and say things like, this was the song we played when we got married. This is the song we played when my son was born. All sorts of, you get some stories you don't want to know. You know, people will say, no, I don't want to hear that bit, you know, but getting married, that was quite kind of nice. That's what you played then. And both Moonlight Shadow and Every Time We Touch seem to have had that thing where they've touched people in a way that it still goes on. Even, like, there was a girl at the gig last night, she must have been about 16 or 17, you know, and she was all gothy and gorgeous looking, and I was like, oh, you're at this concert, you know. But I was kind of surprised, because I didn't think someone of her age and her kind of visual, I would have thought she'd have been more into All About Eve or, you know, some sort of different type of band. But she came and she loved the concert, and I was like, oh, great, and you like those songs, super. You know, long may it last.